CEO stared at the black single dad during robbery. Carry me out safely, I'll kiss you on the spot. Victoria Hartwell had killed 17 deals that week, but buying jewelry for another man's wife was proving surprisingly difficult. She stood in the center of Prestige Jewelers, surrounded by glass cases that sparkled like captured starlight, yet felt more trapped than she had in any boardroom. The anniversary gift for Chairman Morrison's wife wasn't about sentiment, it was about survival. Miss his 25th wedding anniversary, and her promotion to Chief Operating Officer would vanish faster than her last quarterly bonus. Something timeless, Morrison had said with that patronizing smile that made her jaw clench. Elizabeth loves classics. Spare no expense, company card, naturally. Translation: pick something expensive enough to prove the company valued him, but traditional enough that his wife wouldn't suspect Victoria had chosen it personally. Just another delicate negotiation in the endless chess game of corporate politics. The store felt different at 8:30 in the evening. During the day, Prestige buzzed with wealthy housewives and nervous fiancés, but now it held an almost sacred quiet. The main lights were dimmed to accent the jewelry displays, and classical music whispered through hidden speakers. Victoria preferred it this way. Fewer witnesses to watch the ice-cold CEO of Hartwell Industries fumble over picking out someone else's romantic gesture. "Can I help you find anything specific, ma'am?" The voice came from her left, where she hadn't noticed anyone standing. Victoria turned, prepared to deliver her usual crisp dismissal, but stopped short. The man wore a simple black security uniform with Marcus embroidered above the breast pocket. What caught her attention wasn't his imposing frame, or the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. It was his eyes. Alert, intelligent, kind. The kind of eyes that seemed to actually see people, not just process them. "Anniversary gift," she said, softer than intended. 25 years. Classic taste. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That's a beautiful milestone. Your parents?" "Business associate." The words came out sharper than necessary. Victoria caught herself and added, "His wife has very particular tastes." Something flickered across Marcus's face, understanding, maybe, or recognition of the careful distance she'd placed in those words. He gestured toward the far wall. "The vintage collection might work. Those pieces have stories behind them. Real craftsmanship." As they walked across the polished marble floor, Victoria found herself studying him. Most security guards she encountered were either invisible furniture, or overly eager to please once they recognized her name. Marcus was either. He moved with purpose but without aggression, scanning the store with practiced ease while maintaining a conversation that felt genuinely helpful rather than scripted. "You work nights often?" she asked, then immediately wondered why she cared. "Most evenings. Better hours for my situation." He paused at a display case featuring an elegant diamond tennis bracelet. "This one's been here 3 months. Sometimes the right pieces wait for the right moment." Victoria examined the bracelet. It was perfect, expensive enough to impress, classic enough to avoid any uncomfortable questions, beautiful enough that Elizabeth Morrison would actually want to wear it. But her eyes kept drifting to Marcus's security booth in the corner, where she could see the edge of what looked like a child's drawing taped to the inside wall. "Your daughter's artwork?" she asked, nodding toward the booth. Marcus's entire demeanor shifted, his professional mask slipping to reveal something raw and proud. 8 years old and already a better artist than I'll ever be. That's her interpretation of the solar system. She made Neptune purple because it's her favorite color. She sounds remarkable. She's everything." The words carried a weight that Victoria recognized from her own relationship with her work, complete devotion, tinged with worry. "I tell her I guard treasures for a living, but honestly, the real treasure goes home with me every night." Something in Victoria's chest tightened unexpectedly. When was the last time someone had spoken about her with that kind of reverence? When was the last time she'd felt worth protecting rather than worth promoting or demoting or acquiring? The thought was interrupted by the sharp chime of the store's entrance bell. Victoria glanced toward the front, expecting to see another last-minute customer, but the sound felt wrong somehow, too aggressive, too sudden. The classical music seemed to pause. Marcus's head snapped toward the entrance, and Victoria saw every muscle in his body tense. His hand moved instinctively toward the radio clip to his belt, but he didn't key it yet. Professional training warring with hope that he was overreacting. 3 men in dark hoodies and baseball caps pulled low had entered. They moved too quickly, too deliberately, scanning the store layout rather than the jewelry. The last one through the door turned the deadbolt behind him. Victoria's blood turned to ice water. Marcus stepped slightly in front of her, a movement so subtle she almost missed it. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Stay calm. Stay close." The lead figure reached into his jacket, and Victoria caught the metallic glint of something that definitely wasn't a wallet. Her mind, trained to process crisis scenarios and corporate mergers, suddenly went completely blank. All those emergency preparedness seminars, all those hypothetical disaster protocols, and she couldn't remember a single useful thing except the thunderous beating of her own heart. Marcus's radio crackled to life. "Unit 7, this is dispatch. We're showing a silent alarm at your location. Please respond." Time crystallized. The 3 men's heads turned toward the security booth like wolves hearing a dinner bell. Victoria saw Marcus's jaw clench as he calculated odds that suddenly looked very, very bad. The lead man pulled out a pistol and pointed it directly at the ceiling. "Everyone down. Now." The first gunshot shattered more than just glass. It shattered Victoria's entire understanding of how quickly everything she'd built could disappear. As she hit the cold marble floor, her last coherent thought was that she'd never even gotten the man's last name. Chaos erupted like a dam bursting. The elderly woman near the engagement ring screamed, a sound that cut through Victoria's shock like a blade. A young couple by the watch's booth scrambled behind a display case, the man trying to shield his pregnant girlfriend. 2 store clerks behind the main counter stood frozen, hands raised, eyes wide with terror. "Nobody moves, nobody dies." The lead gunman's voice boomed through the store. "Hands where I can see them." Victoria tried to push herself up, but her Louboutin heels betrayed her on the glass-scattered floor. She slipped hard, her knee cracking against the marble as shards of the shattered display case bit through her designer stockings. Blood seeped through the expensive fabric. She was already marked. But Marcus didn't go down. Instead, he moved with calculated precision, stepping sideways to put himself between the gunman and the terrified customers. His hands were raised, but his stance was balanced, ready. Victoria had seen this kind of composure before, in military consultants, former special forces guys her company sometimes hired for overseas operations. But this was different. This was a man protecting strangers because it was simply who he was. "Easy, easy," Marcus said, his voice steady and low. "Everyone's going to cooperate. No one needs to get hurt." The second robber, shorter and twitchier than the leader, swung his weapon toward the elderly woman, who was still sobbing. "Shut her up." Marcus took a careful step forward. "Ma'am, you're going to be okay. Just take some deep breaths. Think about your garden at home." Something about his tone worked. The woman's sobs quieted to shaky breathing. The third gunman looked annoyed, but the leader seemed almost impressed by Marcus's control over the situation. Victoria watched from the floor, mesmerized and horrified. In every crisis meeting she'd ever led, hostile takeovers, emergency budget cuts, public relations disasters, she'd been the one giving orders, maintaining control. Now she was reduced to a bleeding spectator, watching a security guard demonstrate leadership that put her executive team to shame. "You." The leader pointed his gun at Marcus. "Security, right? Where are the cameras?" "2 at the entrance, 1 over the main counter, 1 covering the vault area." Marcus answered immediately, no hesitation. "Smart. Lying would only make things worse. Kill the feeds." Marcus moved toward his booth, but slowly, telegraphing every motion. Victoria noticed how he positioned himself during each step, always maintaining sight lines to the customers, never fully turning his back on anyone vulnerable. When he reached his station, he deliberately knocked his daughter's drawing to the floor, and Victoria realized he was clearing anything personal from view, protecting even that small piece of his world. The feeds went dark on the small monitor, and Marcus raised his hands again. "Good boy," the leader sneered. "Now, everyone listen up. We want the display cases emptied and the vault opened. Do what you're told, and you go home to your families tonight." The pregnant woman whimpered, and Victoria saw Marcus's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. He shifted again, a tiny movement that put him closer to her and the young couple. "This one's fancy," the twitchy robber said suddenly, his attention landing on Victoria with predatory interest. "Look at that outfit. That's real money." Victoria's heart stopped. Her charcoal Saint Laurent suit, the Hermes bag, the Cartier watch, in her world, these were armor, symbols of success and authority. Here, they were a bullseye painted in designer labels. The robber crouched down beside her, his breath hot and sour. "What do you do, princess? Doctor? Lawyer? Something that pays real well?" "I'm nobody special," Victoria managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Bullshit." His eyes raked over her appearance with calculating greed. "That watch costs more than I make in 6 months. That bag? I looked it up once, 20 grand easy." Victoria felt exposed in a way she'd never experienced, even in the most brutal corporate negotiations. Every expensive thing she wore felt like a confession, a map of her vulnerabilities drawn in Italian leather and Swiss precision. Marcus caught her eye from across the room. His expression was carefully neutral, but she saw the slight shake of his head. "Don't give them anything more to work with. Leave her alone," the elderly woman said suddenly, her voice stronger than expected. "She's just a customer like the rest of us." The lead gunman laughed. "A customer wearing 50 grand in accessories? I don't think so." He gestured to his twitchy partner. "Danny, keep an eye on our VIP. If things go sideways, she's our insurance policy." Victoria's blood turned to Arctic cold. In 15 minutes she'd gone from master of the universe to human collateral. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent her career treating people like assets, calculating their value in spreadsheets and strategic plans. Now she knew exactly how it felt to be reduced to a number on someone else's balance sheet. But Marcus was still moving, still thinking, still protecting. Even as the gunman separated him from the other customers, he managed to position the pregnant couple behind a sturdy jewelry case, and guided the elderly woman toward a spot where she'd have cover if shooting started. Victoria had managed hundreds of employees, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and faced down hostile boards of directors. But watching Marcus work, seeing him risk everything for people who were strangers 30 seconds ago, she realized she'd never witnessed true leadership until this moment. The question that terrified her most wasn't whether she'd survive the night. It was whether she'd ever be brave enough to deserve the protection he was giving her. "Vaults in the back." The leader's voice cracked like a whip. "Everyone move! Now!" Victoria tried to stand, her injured knee buckling as broken glass ground into her palms. The world tilted dangerously, and she braced herself for another fall that would draw even more unwanted attention. Then she felt it, a steady hand on her elbow, lifting her with careful strength. Marcus had somehow crossed the store without the gunman noticing. His touch was brief, professional, but it steadied her in ways that had nothing to do with balance. When their eyes met, he held her gaze for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to communicate something wordless and essential. "Trust me. Stay calm. Follow my lead." Victoria Hartwell, who hadn't followed anyone's lead since business school, found herself nodding. The robbers herded them toward the back of the store like cattle, past the repair workshop and into the narrow hallway that led to the vault. The space felt claustrophobic with 7 hostages pressed together, but Marcus positioned himself strategically near the wall, creating a small buffer zone around the pregnant woman and elderly customer. Victoria noticed how he did it, never obvious movements that would anger their captors, just subtle shifts that happened to place himself between civilians and danger. It was like watching a chess master play, except the pieces were people's lives. "Open it!" the leader demanded, shoving the night manager toward the vault door. Mr. Chin, the manager, fumbled with trembling hands at the electronic keypad. It's on a timer. Won't open until 6 a.m. Store policy. The twitchy robber pressed his gun against Chen's temple. Policy's changing tonight, old man. Danny, back off, Marcus said quietly. He's telling the truth. Most jewelry stores use time-delayed systems. Insurance requirement. All eyes turned to him. Victoria felt the temperature in the hallway drop 10 degrees. How would security know that? The leader asked slowly. Marcus kept his voice level. Because I've worked retail security for 12 years. Banks, jewelry stores, electronics. Time delays are standard after business hours. Even managers can't override them. The leader studied Marcus with new interest, and Victoria saw danger crystallizing in his expression. Smart hostages were useful until they became threats. Well, looks like we got ourselves an expert. The gun swung toward Marcus. What else should we know, expert? Before Marcus could answer, the elderly woman stumbled, clutching her chest. Victoria recognized a panic attack when she saw one. She'd witnessed enough in her boardroom. But the woman was hyperventilating badly, her face gray and sweaty. She needs air, Victoria said before she could stop herself. She needs to shut up, Danny snapped. Marcus moved again, this time to catch the woman as she swayed. Ma'am, look at me. Breathe with me. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. His voice carried such calm authority that even Victoria found her own panicked breathing slowing to match his rhythm. The woman's color gradually returned, but she remained leaning against Marcus like he was the only solid thing in a crumbling world. In the temporary quiet, Victoria became hyper-aware of her surroundings. The hallway's emergency exit sign glowed red 10 feet behind them. The leader kept checking his watch. They were on some kind of timeline. Most importantly, Danny's attention kept drifting back to her outfit, calculating her worth like a human appraisal. Marcus caught her eye again and gave the slightest tilt of his head toward the floor. Victoria understood and slowly sank down, making herself smaller, less noticeable. But it was too late. Danny's right about Princess here, the leader said conversationally. Those aren't department store clothes. What's your story, lady? Victoria's mouth went dry. I'm just shopping. Just shopping. He crouched down to her level. In a $5,000 suit. With a bag that costs more than most people's cars. Just shopping. From her position on the floor, Victoria caught Marcus's eye. His expression was carefully blank, but she saw the microscopic shake of his head again. Don't give them anything. But what if they searched her wallet? Her business cards would reveal everything. Her credit cards were Black American Express, the kind reserved for people with 7-figure spending limits. Her driver's license listed her penthouse address in the city's most expensive district. I work in finance, she said finally, which was technically true if incomplete. Finance. The leader smiled without warmth. What kind of finance buys jewelry at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday? Victoria's mind raced. Corporate executives were valuable hostages, worth ransoms, worth headlines, worth FBI involvement that would complicate everything for the robbers. But Fortune 500 CEOs? That was lottery ticket territory. Marcus shifted almost imperceptibly, drawing the leader's attention back to him. Look, man, the vault's not opening tonight no matter what you do to anyone. But these display cases? They're worth plenty, and you can grab them fast. Smart thieves work the easy targets first. The leader's eyes narrowed. Trying to manage this operation, security boy. Just trying to help everyone get through this alive. In that moment, Victoria understood what Marcus was doing. He was making himself the primary focus, the threat they needed to watch, drawing their attention away from her and the other hostages. It was a sacrifice play, and it was working, but it was also painting a target on his back. As the robbers debated their next move, Marcus caught Victoria's eye one final time. This time, his message was crystal clear. Whatever happens next, don't tell them who you really are. Because Victoria Hartwell wasn't just rich. She was Hartford Industries rich. Fortune 100 rich. Her kidnapping would make international news, and everyone in this hallway would become collateral damage in a manhunt that would span continents. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd come to buy someone else's anniversary gift, and instead discovered what it meant to truly value something precious. The question was whether she'd live long enough to figure out what to do with that knowledge. 20 minutes of tense waiting had stretched everyone's nerves to breaking points. The robbers huddled near the vault, their initial confidence cracking as the reality of the time lock sank in. Victoria could hear fragments of their heated argument, something about backup plans and too much heat already. The leader kept checking his phone, and each glance made his jaw tighter. "This is bullshit," Danny muttered, waving his gun erratically. "We should have hit the mall store instead. In and out like we planned." "Shut up and think," the leader hissed. "Display cases still got 50 grand worth of merchandise. We fill the bags, we leave." But the third robber, who'd been silent until now, seemed to be unraveling. His mask had slipped partially off, revealing a face too young for this kind of desperation. Maybe 19, maybe 20. Sweat dripped down his temples despite the store's air conditioning. "Tommy, you good?" the leader asked. Tommy wasn't good. His hands shook as he pointed his weapon randomly around the room, and his breathing was coming too fast. Victoria recognized the signs from her own panic attack experience. He was spiraling. The young store clerk, barely older than Tommy himself, must have seen it too. "Hey man, you okay? You want some water?" It was the wrong thing to say. Tommy spun toward the kid with wild eyes. "Did I ask you to talk? Did I say you could talk?" "No, sir, I'm sorry." "You think this is a joke?" Tommy grabbed the clerk by his vest and slammed him against the wall. "You think we're playing around here?" The kid couldn't have weighed more than 130 soaking wet. Tommy outweighed him by 50 pounds of manic energy and desperation. When the first punch landed in the clerk's stomach, the sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. Marcus moved before Victoria even saw him start. "Hey!" His voice carried the kind of authority that made everyone freeze. "Kid didn't do anything wrong." Tommy turned, fist still raised. "Mind your business, rent-a-cop." "This is my business." Marcus stepped forward deliberately, hands still raised but his posture shifting subtly. "You want to hit someone?" "Hit me." "Marcus, don't," the clerk gasped. But it was too late. Tommy's rage found a new target, and this one was big enough to handle what he was carrying. The first punch caught Marcus in the ribs, a sound like a baseball bat hitting a sandbag. He absorbed it without going down, which seemed to enrage Tommy further. "You want to be a hero?" Tommy screamed, landing another blow across Marcus's jaw. "Here's your hero moment." Victoria watched in horror and fury as Marcus took punishment meant for a kid half his size. He could have fought back. She could see the controlled power in his frame, the way he positioned himself to deflect the worst impacts. But fighting back might get someone else hurt, so he took it. The leader finally grabbed Tommy's arm. "Enough. We need him functional." But something had shifted in the group dynamics. As Tommy stepped back, breathing hard, the leader looked at Marcus with new interest, not just as security to neutralize, but as someone worthy of a different kind of respect. "You got balls, guard," he said quietly. "Stupid balls, but balls." Marcus wiped blood from his split lip and nodded toward the clerk. "The kid's learned his lesson. We good?" The leader actually smiled, a real smile this time. "Yeah. We're good." When the robbers moved back to arguing about exit strategies, Victoria found herself pressed against the wall next to Marcus in the cramped hallway. The metallic taste of fear filled her mouth as she whispered urgently. "Why? Why what? Why risk yourself for strangers?" The words came out harsher than she intended, but she couldn't help it. She'd watched him take a beating for someone he'd never met, and it made her feel things she couldn't name, admiration tangled with fury, respect mixed with complete bewilderment. Marcus was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the robbers' continued arguing. "Because my daughter deserves to grow up in a world where someone does." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. In 7 simple syllables, he just dismantled every cynical assumption she'd built her career on. Every calculated decision, every strategic alliance, every time she'd chosen profit over people, all of it crumbled against the weight of that single sentence. "That's it," she whispered. "That's your whole philosophy?" Marcus looked at her with eyes that had seen too much, but still chose hope. "My little girl asks me every night what heroes are like. I can't tell her they only exist in storybooks." Victoria felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been frozen solid for longer than she cared to admit. In her world, people protected themselves first, their families second, and strangers never. Marcus had that equation completely backwards, and somehow it worked. Somehow it made him stronger than any executive she'd ever met. "What if you don't make it home to her?" Victoria asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Then at least she'll know her daddy tried to be the kind of person she could be proud of." For 15 years, Victoria had measured success in stock prices and market share. She'd built an empire on the principle that strength meant never showing weakness, that leadership meant never backing down, that winning required treating other people as obstacles or opportunities. Watching Marcus take punches meant for a stranger had just proven every single one of those beliefs wrong. The robber's argument was getting more heated. Something about police response times and whether they had enough time to crack the individual display cases. Victoria could hear the strain in their voices. Their plan was falling apart, and desperate criminals made fatal mistakes. But Marcus was still thinking 3 moves ahead. When Danny turned away to grab jewelry tools from the repair station, Marcus subtly guided the elderly woman toward a support beam that would give her cover. When Tommy started pacing anxiously near the pregnant couple, Marcus shifted to intercept any potential violence. He was playing defense with people's lives, and he was winning. Victoria realized she was watching a master class in leadership that no business school could teach. Marcus had no authority here, no title, no power, just the unshakable conviction that protecting others was worth any personal cost. "You're incredible," she breathed. Marcus glanced at her, surprised. "I'm scared to death." "But you're doing it anyway." "That's what scared people do. They do it anyway." In that moment, Victoria understood why her employees had always seemed to fear her more than respect her. She'd confused authority with leadership, power with strength. She'd spent years building walls to keep others at a distance, while Marcus had spent years building bridges to pull people to safety. The revelation should have been devastating. Instead, it felt like awakening. "Time's up," the leader announced suddenly. "We take what we can carry and get out. Tommy, grab the diamonds from case 3. Danny, load up anything under 10 carats from the main displays." As the robbers began their rushed collection, Victoria felt Marcus's hand brush against hers, brief, warm, steadying. When she looked up, he was already scanning the hallway, calculating angles and distances with the same precision he'd shown all night. Something was about to happen. She could feel it in the shift of his posture, the way his breathing had changed. Marcus was planning something, and Victoria realized with crystalline clarity that whatever came next would determine whether they all went home alive, or whether her last conversation would be about heroes and daughters and the kind of world worth fighting to create. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd come to buy someone else's anniversary gift and instead discovered what it meant to truly value something precious. The question was whether she'd live long enough to figure out what to do with that knowledge. Change of plans. The leader's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "We're moving locations. Everyone up." Victoria felt her stomach drop. Moving hostages meant desperation, and desperate criminals made deadly mistakes. She struggled to her feet, her injured knee screaming in protest, and caught sight of Marcus's face. His expression was carefully controlled, but she saw something new flickering behind his eyes: calculation, opportunity, hope. "Where are we going?" the elderly woman asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Delivery vans outside," Danny answered, shouldering a duffel bag stuffed with jewelry. "Nice quiet ride while we figure out our next move." Marcus's hand found the small of Victoria's back as they were pushed toward the rear exit. His touch was fleeting but deliberate, a signal that something was about to happen. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized he was planning an escape attempt. The back alley reeked of garbage and rain from earlier storms. A white delivery van sat running 15 feet from the store's emergency exit, its rear doors gaping open like a hungry mouth. The leader gestured with his gun toward the vehicle. "Ladies first. Princess, you're riding up front with me." Victoria's blood turned to ice. Being separated from Marcus and the other hostages would eliminate any chance of escape, and make her the perfect bargaining chip if things went wrong. "She stays with us," Marcus said firmly. The leader laughed. "You don't make demands here, hero." "I'm not making demands. I'm stating facts." Marcus's voice carried absolute certainty. "You separate her from the group, the others panic. Panicked hostages make noise, draw attention, cause problems you don't need." Tommy nodded nervously. "He's right. Keep them together, keep them calm." Victoria watched the leader's face as he considered this, and realized Marcus had just used the man's own paranoia against him. "Brilliant. Fine. Everyone in the back. But Princess sits by the door where I can see her." They shuffled toward the van in single file. Victoria limped along, acutely aware that each step took them further from any hope of rescue. The police sirens she'd been praying to hear remained conspicuously absent. The silent alarm had either failed, or the response was being delayed for tactical reasons. Marcus helped the elderly woman step up into the van, then turned to assist Victoria. As his hand steadied her, she felt him press something small and hard into her palm. A glance revealed it was his security card key, plastic with a sharp edge that could cut zip ties if needed. They were the last ones to board. Marcus swept his eyes across the alley one final time, and Victoria saw him note the dumpster placement, the fire escape ladder, the narrow gap between buildings that might, just might, provide cover. "Move it!" Danny shoved Marcus forward. But as Marcus stepped into the van, he suddenly stumbled, grabbing the door frame for support. Sorry, my ankle." In the confusion of his apparent clumsiness, Victoria caught his real purpose. He'd wedged the door mechanism slightly open with his foot. Not enough for the robbers to notice immediately, but enough that it wouldn't latch properly. They were barely inside when Tommy's phone buzzed. He answered with shaking hands. "What? No, we're not there yet." "Why?" His face went white. "Cops just blocked off 5th Street. They know about the van." The leader cursed violently. "How do they know about the van? Maybe someone saw us loading gear? Or maybe Princess here isn't as innocent as she looks," Danny said, his paranoid attention swinging back to Victoria. Marcus stepped protectively in front of her, but Victoria could feel the situation spiraling beyond anyone's control. The robbers' careful plan was collapsing, and desperate people with guns made fatal decisions. "Everyone out! We go on foot!" the leader ordered. But Tommy had other ideas. In his panic, he grabbed Victoria's arm with bruising force. "No! She's our ticket! Look at her! Someone will pay millions to get her back!" Victoria felt the walls closing in. Marcus was tense to move, but 3 guns were now trained directly on them in the confined space of the van. Any sudden motion would trigger a bloodbath. Then she heard it, the distant sound of police sirens, growing louder. "They found us," Danny whispered, his voice cracking. The leader's face twisted with rage. "Move! Everyone out, now!" In the chaos that followed, Victoria saw her moment. As the robbers scrambled to evacuate the van, Marcus caught her eye and nodded toward the partially jammed door. But Tommy still had her arm in a death grip, and the leader was scanning frantically for any sign of approaching police. Victoria made her choice. She grabbed Marcus's injured hand and pulled him closer, her voice barely audible above the confusion. "Carry me out safely, and I'll kiss you on the spot." The words surprised her even as she spoke them. Half desperation, half defiance, and something else entirely. A promise that cut through every careful boundary she'd built around her heart. Marcus's eyes widened, but not with shock. With understanding. With determination. With something that looked remarkably like hope. Hold on tight, he whispered back. What happened next took less than 10 seconds but felt like slow motion. Marcus moved with explosive precision, one hand yanking the jammed door fully open, the other sweeping Victoria behind him as he dove toward the alley. Shouts erupted behind them, but they were already rolling behind the dumpster as the first shots cracked through the air. Victoria found herself pressed against cold brick and warm muscle, Marcus's body sheltering her from the chaos. Sirens wailed closer now, and she could hear the robbers shouting contradictory orders at each other. But all she could focus on was the steady rhythm of Marcus's heartbeat against her cheek, and the impossible fact that they were both still breathing. "You okay?" he asked softly. Victoria looked up at the man who'd just risked everything for a group of strangers, who'd taken a beating for a kid he'd never met, who'd thrown himself between her and certain death without hesitation. "Ask me again when this is over," she whispered. Because she was beginning to suspect that, okay, might mean something completely different after tonight. Police boots thundered into the alley, tactical flashlights cutting through the darkness. The robbers' voices grew more distant. They were scattering, running, leaving their hostages behind in their desperation to escape. Marcus and Victoria stayed pressed against the dumpster, hearts hammering in shared rhythm, as their nightmare finally began to end. But Victoria was already realizing that the real story, their story, was just beginning. The police operation unfolded with military precision. SWAT officers flooded the alley within minutes, tactical gear gleaming under the harsh streetlights. Victoria heard shouting, running footsteps, and the metallic click of handcuffs echoing off the brick walls. 2 of the robbers were caught trying to scale a fence 3 blocks away. The third, Tommy, was found hiding in a restaurant dumpster, still clutching his empty gun. "Ma'am? Sir? You're safe now." A young officer crouched beside their hiding spot, his voice gentle but urgent. "Are either of you injured?" Victoria started to shake her head, then noticed the dark stain spreading across Marcus's left sleeve. Blood. Fresh blood. "You're hurt," she said, her voice sharp with concern. Marcus looked down at his arm with mild surprise. "Must have caught some glass during the dive. Doesn't feel like much. It looks like more than glass." Victoria was already moving, her corporate crisis management instincts kicking in. "Officer, we need paramedics here now." The next hour passed in a blur of emergency vehicles, crime scene tape, and endless questions. Victoria found herself refusing to leave Marcus's side as EMTs cleaned and bandaged the graze that ran from his elbow to his wrist, not deep enough to require surgery, but ugly enough that it would scar. "Bullet fragment ricocheted off the van," the paramedic explained as he worked. "Quarter-inch to the right, and you might have lost the arm entirely." Victoria's hands clenched involuntarily. A quarter-inch. The difference between Marcus going home to his daughter tonight, or never going home at all. Detective Sarah Morrison, no relation to Victoria's board chairman, thankfully, approached with a notepad and tired eyes. "Ms. Hartwell, we'll need your statement about what happened inside." Word had gotten out. Victoria saw recognition flicker across the detective's face as she processed the name, and knew it was only a matter of time before the media arrived. Forbes' youngest female CEO held hostage during jewelry store robbery would be front-page news by morning. But when the local news crews set up their cameras outside the store, Victoria surprised everyone, including herself. "The real hero of tonight is Marcus Johnson," she said directly into Channel 7's camera. "While I was paralyzed with fear, he took charge. He protected every single person in that store, put himself between us and harm, and ultimately saved all our lives. The city should know his name, not mine." Behind the camera, she saw Marcus talking quietly with an officer, his daughter's drawing, somehow retrieved from his security booth, folded carefully in his uninjured hand. When the interview ended, Victoria walked over to him, ignoring the reporters still shouting questions. "How do I get in touch with you?" she asked simply. Marcus looked surprised. "You don't need to check on me. I'm fine. That's not why I'm asking." Something in her tone made him study her face more carefully. Around them, the crime scene was winding down. Officers were packing equipment, paramedics were loading their truck, and the excitement was fading into routine paperwork. Victoria gestured toward her car, parked half a block away. "Walk with me." They moved slowly through the emptying street, past curious onlookers and flashing emergency lights. Victoria's knee still throbbed, and Marcus favored his injured arm, but somehow they found a rhythm that worked for both of them. "I made you a promise in that van," Victoria said when they reached her Mercedes. Marcus smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him all night. "You were scared. People say things when they're scared. I wasn't just scared." Victoria turned to face him fully. "I was watching the bravest person I'd ever met risk everything for strangers, including me. That promise wasn't fear-talking, it was gratitude." Before Marcus could respond, Victoria rose on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. Not the desperate bargaining chip she'd offered in the van, but something real and warm and freely given. When they separated, Marcus's eyes were wide with surprise and something that looked like wonder. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. "For protecting us. For showing me what courage actually looks like. For reminding me that some things matter more than profit margins. Victoria! I mean it." She pulled out her business card and wrote something on the back. "This isn't charity or guilt or whatever you might think. It's an offer. My company has a head of security position opening next month. Real salary, real benefits, college fund for your daughter. You'd be protecting something that matters, employees who deserve to go home safe every night." Marcus stared at the card. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." Victoria's voice carried the same quiet certainty Marcus had shown all night. "I know you stepped between guns and innocent people without hesitation. I know you took a beating meant for someone else. I know you risked your life for a room full of strangers because you want your daughter to grow up in a better world." She paused, looking back toward the jewelry store where yellow tape still fluttered in the evening breeze. "I spent 15 years thinking leadership meant being the smartest person in the room, the one with all the answers, the one who never showed weakness. Tonight, I watched real leadership. It looks like putting other people first, even when it costs you everything. Especially when it costs you everything." Marcus was quiet for a long time, studying her face in the streetlight. "What if I'm not what you think I am? What if you're exactly what I think you are?" Victoria countered. "What if you're the kind of person who makes everyone around him better, braver, more willing to do the right thing? What if my company, my employees, need someone like that more than they need another executive with an MBA and a corner office?" A police cruiser drove slowly past, its occupants checking the scene one final time. In the distance, Victoria could hear the city settling back into its normal rhythm, traffic, sirens, the endless pulse of 8 million people living their lives. "My daughter," Marcus said finally. "She's everything to me." "I know." Victoria's smile was soft but determined. "The job comes with family health insurance, flexible hours, and a childcare stipend. She can visit the office after school. We have a great kids area on the 20th floor. You're serious?" "Dead serious." Victoria extended her hand. "Partners?" Marcus looked at her outstretched hand, then at her face, then back at the card she'd given him. When he finally reached out and shook her hand, his grip was firm and warm and absolutely certain. Partners. As Victoria drove home through the quiet city streets, she kept thinking about the drawing taped inside Marcus's security booth, a little girl's purple Neptune floating in a universe where anything was possible. Tomorrow, she'd tear up Chairman Morrison's anniversary shopping list and buy his wife something she picked out herself. She'd reorganize her executive team around people who protected others instead of just protecting their own interests. But tonight, she'd discovered something more valuable than any diamond in Prestige Jewelers' vault. She'd found someone who made her want to be worthy of the courage he'd shown. For the first time in years, Victoria Hartwell was genuinely excited about going to work in the morning. The most expensive jewelry in the store couldn't compete with the richness of a second chance.